everybody. This is going to be a rough raw video going over the Wyckoff schematics of a few tokens, mainly Bitcoin. Obviously, we need to know, the entire ecosystem needs to know where Bitcoin's going in order to understand where everything else is going, because the entire cryptocurrency market is so heavily pegged to Bitcoin over the past 6 months to a year. So you have to understand where Bitcoin's going to understand where anything's going. Any of your favorite tokens, it has a major effect on most of those movements, including the NFT market. That's a whole nother video. It's a whole nother discussion. But let's figure out what's happening to Bitcoin. Let me make sure I'm on the right screen. Yep. This is the overall. This is an idea of what's happening on the overall time frame. We can get rid of this for now. It is helpful to figure out where the top levels are and the bottom levels are. But Wyckoff accumulation schematic, as you can see here, this is for the lower time frame. So let's go to the distribution schematic. These are the most common distribution schematics. It's obvious to me we're at the end of a bull run, so we're going to be in distribution being that we're going to have a breakdown sometime soon. So let me just show you what I showed my group on the charts. A lot of discussion going on, which is what we like to see. I appreciate you guys and gals. The last time I talked about Bitcoin, where is it at? I could have sworn I put the distribution on here. Okay, that's for Solana. I may have put it on the open chat. Okay, there's an idea there for the DXYs and distribution on the 1 day. Okay. I know I was posting it. I forget what I was seeing. Okay, forget that. So the distribution schematic, from what I'm seeing and from what a lot of people are seeing, is we are pretty much, you look at the middle one here, we're pretty much running the middle schematic here for Bitcoin. Ideally, and from what I've been able to see, we broke past this red trend line here. I believe we are currently at, so we got the support touch, and we're currently at this part of the schematic right there. And I believe we're going to accumulate here and then start this one last final uptrend. Now, whether we are going to come to, whether it's going to be something like this here where we get a lower high and then we get more weakness there, or we continue higher to a higher high and then break down, that is yet to be seen. So the best thing we can do in this situation is play as safe as possible and to gather as much profit off of this move as possible. We're going to play it first like we're going to a lower high than this area here. Lower high shows heavy signs of weakness on Bitcoin before we break down and we start talking about lower lows on the overall chart. So if we go back here, this is on the 1 day chart, and also do not take the this is my example of what could possibly happen if we get a lower high. We can go lower, we can go here, we can go to the 618. I think ultimately we can safely say we're going to go to the 618, but I think ultimately we're going to go to the 786 level here around 57K to make somewhat of a what would look like a head and shoulders, because this area here where it says ST, we move out the way, this is still higher than this. So we could have some slanted neckline, sort of ascending triangle looking pattern happening where we get a lower high from this level and we create what would look like to be a right shoulder on Bitcoin, and that would scare out a lot of money around this area. But at the same time, the news media outlets, powers that be, miners, U.S. has been taking over mining so they can have control of Bitcoin. Keep that in mind. Um, they're going to paint a positive picture, start painting a positive picture of Bitcoin at 50K plus, and you're going to start to get a lot of people back in at 50K instead of taking much lower risk down here and possibly putting a stop loss somewhere down here where you're supposed to. A lot more people, market psychology says a lot of people are going to get back in above 50K. It's a heavy psychological level. So I believe we're going to break 50K. I think the highest we can go in this example would be around 62K before we have a pullback, and then we trend somewhat sideways until we get a higher high breakout. And that is if we follow this schematic here, playing it safe, and we have a lower high. I believe we go to no higher than 57, 58K. So we'll see how that plays out. We're currently in phase B. In order to get to phase C, we have to break into a higher. We have to start breaking into a higher high where this blue line is. But I think we have not hit a top yet. If you look at the RSI down here, we're near all-time lows, well, at least for the past 2 years. This is March 2020. Everybody remembers March 2020, the start of the pandemic, and S&P 500 drops significantly, Bitcoin dropped significantly, and then we had a huge recovery. From then on, for the next year or two, we got to 62K or 65K. Here we are again, right near that level. So I believe we're going to get at least a very good reaction off of this bottom here before we figure out what we're going to do next after that. But I believe this is a pretty good shakeout overall. We are this is ultimately an ascending triangle. Ascending triangles are bullish. You're going to get some action happening this way. Higher lows going on up. I believe we get a higher high. Honestly, this is my personal target from looking at from doing the Wyckoff schematics. We get one more up thrust. Up thrust being, let me see if I can find a schematic for you. Wyckoff accumulation. No, I need distribution, right? Yeah. Okay, here's a better look at what I'm currently trying to explain. We get one more up thrust, and this is the exact schematic I've been looking at. You can kind of see it here. We got a lot of chop down here in the sign of weakness, SOW sign of weakness. AR is automatic reaction. BC is buy and climax. ST is supply test in this case for distribution. UT is an up thrust that's past the level of what's supposed to be resistance. And you can see here how you draw out the lines. And if you're new to charts, if you're intermediate to advanced, this stuff is fairly easy to draw out. You just draw it out as you see it, and it'll pretty much line up for itself. But from what I'm seeing down here in the sign of weakness in phase B, it's pretty much the start of phase B. And you can see as we go along, I believe we're right here, and we start somewhat of a new uptrend. And if you follow this, price action won't follow this schematic exactly, but it gives you a great idea of what's going to happen. And then we get a last up thrust after distribution. We get a retest to get what's called, to me, a bull trap. and then we start trending down, that's also a great, if we get this up thrust anywhere, I say what my target was, let's go back to what I was originally saying. If we get anything past, let me say, I had the Fibonacci levels up here, anything past 75K, honestly, that's a great time to start a short. But we could have an emotional push, say to 94 or so, where people start thinking, oh, we're going to 100. Then you start getting the media outlets saying, oh, we're still going to 150, we're going to 180, so on and so forth. And it becomes a bull trap. So I'm going to be very, very cautious after anything above 74, 75K. Because the rest of that move over the course of a week, 2 weeks, is going to be an emotional push up, and it's going to trap a lot of people. And as you can see here, it's a roller coaster ride on down. And ultimately, let me give you my guess. Ultimately, we go down to 24, somewhere between 21 and 24K. We never go under 21K ever again. And that becomes the bottom, and we start to reaccumulate. We flip these. We flip from a distribution schematic to an accumulation schematic, and you go from there. That's ultimately what my target is, what's going to happen. Worst case, we go lower high and we continue on down with more signs of weakness. I'm looking to buy anything under 25K, honestly, under 24K, but I think we have one big move left. That's what I'm going to play. I'm going to play this supposed right shoulder right here. Reassess the market. Hopefully we do get a dip on a lower high here, so we're not just shooting straight up in a straight line at a bad angle, and we get more accumulation in this zone. We got to refill this zone back up before we make a move back up. So that's what I'm looking for there. That's on the high time frame. Low time frame, we're considering the 4 hour. That was the 1 day time frame. It looks like Bitcoin has been in the accumulation schematic. It doesn't look like your typical schematic. Yes, if you turn this if you make this flat, it will look like the typical accumulation schematic, but ultimately that doesn't matter. Angles matter, but when you figure out the reversal pattern, which Wyckoff accumulation is considered, the angle really doesn't matter. It's still an accumulation pattern. So if you take a look at the accumulation schematics, you can see that we are somewhat in an ascending channel, and usually ascending channels retest the resistance that they retest old resistance as support. So we ultimately want to see a sign of strength. SOS is sign of strength. After these few up thrusts, that's an up thrust. Anything past the automatic reaction here, anything past the automatic reaction, to me, and from what I've done in my research, is considered resistance. And it looks like we've accumulated within that resistance zone for a while now. 4 hours RSI still shows that we could have some more strength coming in, and that strength should at least lead to an ascending triangle, top of the trend line touch here around 40,000 or 40,500 or so. So that's what I'm looking for, at least here, and to also make a test of this overall trend line, which seems to be a big downward column, descending column. Descending column reaccumulates at the bottom, which is obviously what we're doing. If that's what we were looking for, which we are at the bottom of we're looking for the bottom of a bearish move, which this falling column is considered a bearish move. We look for the reversal. We ultimately want to come back and touch this area, this old support made into resistance. as you can see here in this level here, we didn't come all the way back to this level on this wave. So the final bottom and the final wave usually comes all the way back up here, even if we get a pretty big pullback to what I would estimate to be somewhere between 38K and 39, 38 and 39K. After we come up to 40,400 or possibly even higher. The highest I see us going is somewhere a little bit under 43K. Okay, and that would be a better show of strength if we come all the way up here. We break this trend line. We end up retesting this trend line or retesting support. If this is vertical support, we would test somewhere back at 40K before continuing up and continuing the accumulation schematic. So that's ultimately what I see with Bitcoin. And I wanted to show you Solana as well. Solana is getting very popular. It's the #2, and look where we're at right now. Just had a discussion with my guys about what's going on Discord about what's going on with Solana. Solana doesn't look too good long term. So that's the low time frame. This is the high time frame here. As I said, Solana looks like it's at the end of a distribution pattern, which most of these coins are. We're at the end of a distribution pattern for Bitcoin means it looks like we at least have one more leg up. So that's a positive. That's the positive coming out of what would seem like a negative being in a distribution pattern. But Solana has shown a lot of failure, a lot of weakness. And as I'm going to show here, we still need to figure out if it will successfully reaccumulate here, or if we'll continue to fall. Ultimately, I think we get a resistance test. Here's the schematic that I followed. It's not always going to be the exact length or the time frame, but it's very similar. So that's the schematic we were looking at. Solana, it made a dip down to 110 and came back to 112.60. Let's zoom back out first so I can continue talking about the high time frame. If you're a hodler, if you're not a trader, you're going to want to stick with the high time frame action. Well, that's funny, and we dropped 50 cents that quickly. It's trying to find a zone. I'll get to that in a minute. Ultimately, let's get a lot of these distractions out of the way. Ultimately, Solana had that BC stands for buying climax. If you want to know what these labels stand for, just search for Wyckoff schematics glossary, and it'll give you all the different labels and what they mean. We'll even take out, it's important to have these, and there's a reason why. We'll take out the EMAs right now, the color lines, but showing an obvious area of resistance coming up between 131 and 140, in my opinion. We'll take these out for now, though, just so there's less noise. Get rid of a few of these I don't even use anymore. Excuse me. Well, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. Let me take that out. Don't use that anymore. Okay. So we took out a lot of the noise. We still keep the volume. Volume is a big indicator as to what's going to happen at each level. But BC is buying climax. We got to drop down to what some would consider PS as possible support, or there's other ways to label this area. You get a reaction down to that level, a pullback, and then the automatic reaction back up, and then you get a shakeout, which acts as kind of an early spring. The average distribution schematic, let me try to find it, would show you that the normal distribution schematic will show you that it's just a sign of weakness. But here, I don't believe we're using this basic distribution schematic, because we didn't get an up thrust after distribution in a test here. because we did not get the secondary support test here, well, we got a lower support test. We didn't get an even support test on the shakeout. This one's considered it's considered a sign of weakness, but it's also because we got higher lows on this chart. It's considered more of a shakeout before we got an ultimate up thrust. The up thrust after distribution, is more closely following this. Where's it at? This schematic here. We got buy-in climax. We had a few support tests. We got a few support tests in an accumulating zone, and then we got one higher up thrust and then one more test before we started dropping down. So that's what I was seeing there. This isn't even really considered an up thrust. It's just another test, honestly. I was trying to figure out which one it would be more like. So I added the support test here. It was more of a support test. So we got a few tests, and then we had a drop. You could call this a diagonal head and shoulders, sort of, going from here to here. And then you get the drop. You got the retest above the neckline, and you got to drop back below it. And ultimately, we retested support. We got a falling wedge happening here, in my opinion. Ultimately, it's not really a falling wedge. You have more of just a downward trend line. We hit last possible support somewhere around here. Support being this area here, somewhere between here and here. We retested back to resistance, fell short of the 618. Ideally, you want to break back above the 618 in order to justify it continuing up and accumulation happening again, but we didn't get that. We dropped back below the shakeout support. We got a major sign of weakness, and then that's where we zoom into the lower time frames to get a better idea of what's happening at this last area, after this last possible supply area here, where we have the red now what used to be support is now resistance. And you see here we're at what seems to be resistance for just this supply level. Is an empty area. We call that supply. This empty area here, we had to refill it back down, and now we're back under that supply zone. Well, we also have a downward trend line that is battling right now, and then that's where we zoom in one more time to give you a better idea of what could possibly happen at this trend line. And again, you can, or not again, but the idea is you zoom in closer to get a better idea of what's happening. You get more detail of what's happening at this area. So we did get a show of strength above the resistance area. What looks like, if we're in a weaker market, what would look like to be a resistance area. But connecting back to NFTs, Solana is the second biggest market for NFTs. I've been buying a lot of Solana NFTs, anticipating that we do go slightly higher in the entire market. So whether we take a break back down here to refill this supply area, last possible support or last possible supply, if we break under this and we retest this area, that's a sign of weakness, and we're possibly done with this move. And Solana is even possibly done. We go back under 100, we go back under 80 or so, and it's not looking good for a while. But I believe the entire market is ready for one more push up, and that will benefit Solana, at least in the short term. Or this is one big fake out before we go slightly higher, 618, back to the 618 or so. But I think ultimately we go back to 130 with Solana, whether we touch 100 again and come back up, as major psychological support, or we break out higher to next resistance area, next supply area before retesting this trend line or somewhere around the top of this support here before making another move up. So that's my idea with Solana. Another one I've been trading, well, for the past week or so is Near. Near and FTM are the what seem to be the next blockchains that are getting a lot of interest and a lot of venture capital money thrown into it. A lot of other blockchains are connecting to it. So a lot of money is going to be coming to it, specifically Ethereum with their EVM, Ethereum Virtual Machine Connector. So I've been playing this very carefully, very closely. So it's my most detailed chart. We can get rid of some of the noise. Again, I just took the this is pretty much the basic accumulation schematic that I used. And we're getting a bunch of higher lows here as support test that shows that there's interest in this project. Higher low, higher low, higher low. Accumulation in this zone. We're getting the retest. Again, don't follow the orange lines as exact. I'm just using the Fibonacci levels as popular areas of supply and demand. But what I believe is happening here is we're getting an accumulation. This is on the low time frames, by the way. This is called the cup and handle Wyckoff accumulation schematic. I believe we're going to accumulate here. We're going to get at least a move up. Hopefully above the 618 here, or a little bit below it before we retest the golden high time frame 618, and then a move back up into a higher supply zone somewhere between $13 and $14.50. That's on the low time frame. I believe there is a lot of money coming in, a lot of strength into Near. Near has a new type of NFT that they are pushing out as well. Every new blockchain advances the older blockchains, and so that's what them and Phantom are attempting to do with their blockchain. We zoom out. I'm not sure if I really don't have much for Nears. It looks a lot like how Avalanche looked. It's hard to chart this out on a Wyckoff. From a Wyckoff standpoint, yes, if you turn this whole chart sideways, you'll probably get something, and I could probably do something like that. This will be selling climax support test, and we're getting another support test here, and ideally we're waiting for an up thrust, and we'd want to see somewhere around $29 to end this market, and that's just what I'm seeing on the high time frame. But right now I'm just sticking with the lower time frames. I believe this whole area here has to be filled back in, so I think we could even go to $16. That'd be a great show of strength. But those are the three I wanted to show. Besides that, bonus. I think this is high time frame. High time frame for the U.S. dollar index. I tell my group and YouTube all the time that as the U.S. dollar index goes, Bitcoin and crypto pretty much does the opposite. This is on the 1 week chart. This is if we were seeing an up thrust. So we have higher lows here. If we're going to see another up thrust, we get something like this to 100 or 99, even possibly to 102, 103 before we come back down. But we could also be playing out the lower high schematic as we see. Where's the lower high? We're in distribution on the US dollar index. That's good news for crypto. Keep that in mind. If we're doing this higher low schematic, then we're pretty much done, and we're coming down here until we find a lower high, and then we have to start backfilling. We get a lower high somewhere down here, and then we might get a bounce back into resistance, and then we start backfilling this area down here until we hit a new lower high. That would happen over the course of a year or so. But if we zoom in, let me take away some noise. There's way too much going on here. Keep this on the higher time frame. We'll keep the high time frame Fibonacci levels. I think this is an important bounce level as well. Let's take that away. I guess we don't get the volume. Okay, get rid of it then. Okay. On the 1 day, we zoom in. We can see that we got the highly anticipated pullback down. We tested the supply zone to the very top of the wick, so that's not a very reliable indicator that we have tested all the supply. We got the US dollar got a bounce. That's possibly off of the news that the Fed was going to raise interest rates, so that scared a lot of banks into raising the interest rates on retail consumers, just so they can prepare themselves with all the collecting all the fees on us in order to pay back the loans that they took from the Fed. Okay, so what we're seeing here on the 1 day is we got a pretty big drop down. This is just on a 1 day chart to open the week to test out this support area. We could draw the schematics here, but let's just talk about it. This is the buying climax. We got a what we want to call support test or sign of weakness. We got an automatic reaction here, and then we got another support test in phase B. This is a supply test at the top. We end up dropping down here for another sign of weakness, and we got pretty much a lower high on this before we got this major sign of weakness. Now let's take a quick look at which schematic it's following. Distribution schematic. I think ultimately we're following either this one or this one here. I would like to say it's this one here. Now let's see, because it kind of reaccumulated. We dropped here, we reaccumulated all the way back up. So it may be this one. This is the one we're following here. Buying climax, set the resistance level, reaccumulate down here. We got one big up thrust. So we're going to call this the last up thrust. Up thrust. We'll just call it up thrust, not after distribution. I mean, it could be. We got the accumulation here. We got the drop down. We got to drop down back to support, way below support. We came, which would be considered here. We got the up thrust, and we got the test right next to it. And now what I see happening is we're getting this little shoulder action happening here. Maybe over the course of the week, we're going to have some accumulation in this zone before we start our descent down into no man's land down here. And I think ultimately our next test is somewhere between 92 or 93 and 94. So again, where the US dollar goes, Bitcoin crypto does opposite. So it's actually looking good, I think, over the course of this week and possibly even next week for where the cryptocurrency market is going. And we take that in consideration with what's happening with Bitcoin. I believe we have one big leg up coming. This is on the 1 day chart. I think maybe we have another month and a half where we get this really good Bitcoin and crypto market action happening. Keep all that in mind. It was a lot, but this is what you need to know in order to see what's coming for the entire market. You're buying NFTs, you're buying any of the other cryptocurrencies. You have to know what's going on in the overall scheme of things. I'm going to say I'm going to add this in. The red zone here for Bitcoin, I don't think is that big of a deal if we even go back down to 31K. Don't use leverage. I don't recommend using leverage until we get past 42K. Honestly, it's just too dangerous right now. So keep this red zone in mind that we could go back down here and still be safe. Because look what happened here. We got a lot of overextending wicks, a lot of unnecessary stuff. And I think the institutional investors using Bitcoin futures ETF, they were able to use their power to push the price of Bitcoin down much further than it even needed to go. So we got this long sideways action which ended up being a reaccumulation phase. Sign of weakness on overall distribution schematic, but this zone here became a reaccumulation phase. A lot of people got scared. Even the best traders got scared out here because they didn't understand the Wyckoff accumulation schematics. So it's important to understand this. If you don't know anything, or if you don't know much about trading, this is probably a good place to advance your knowledge. You know candles, you know supports and resistances, you know trend lines, you know volume. This is probably the best place to start, is learning Wyckoff accumulation phases and distribution as well. If you have any questions, let me know. That's what I'm here for. To help everybody, as many people, understand what's going on in the crypto markets and help them succeed as I have. So thank you for watching, and I hope this helped. Talk to you later.